The average salary in the United States is currently $65,000 per year. With high prices, high mortgage rates, and high inflation, how much can one actually afford on $65,000 per year? Now, I want to be very, very clear. It's not impossible to buy a house with $65,000, but it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be an easy process because it's essentially going to limit your available inventory, your options. And depending on where you're located in the country, it might be more difficult than other places. Remember, all real estate is local. So in some areas of the country, it's going to be a little bit more doable at $65,000 a year versus other areas of the country. In fact, I'm located here in Southern California, where it is impossible to buy a home if you only make $65,000 a year unless you have a substantial down payment. But the point here is that it's all relative. So depending on where you are, it's going to be a little bit more realistic than maybe other areas of the United States. But in this video, we're going to discuss what your payment actually looks like if you make $65,000 a year and how much home you can actually buy using the traditional 28/36 debt to income ratio. We're also going to look at it based on what Dave Ramsey recommends. And then I'm going to give you a more realistic view based off debt to income ratios of loan programs like an FHA loan that is the most lenient out there and allows you to qualify for more home with more monthly debt. I want to be very, very clear. This video isn't to push you to go buy a home. It's nothing like that at all. In fact, we as realtors, we get a lot of slack out there in the market when we make videos like this, like we're just trying to push people to go buy real estate, when in all reality, the video is for educational purposes. It's there to give you an idea of how much home you can actually afford so that you can plan accordingly and put yourself in the best positions so that you know exactly where you stand when the opportunity presents itself. Now, I want to start today's video by talking about Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey is a renowned financial expert, and he has really clear guidelines on how much he believes you should be spending on your monthly mortgage payment. With that, Ramsey actually believes that your monthly mortgage payment should not exceed more than 25% of your take-home pay. And this includes your mortgage payment, which is principal and interest, your property taxes, your homeowner's insurance. If you have an HOA on that property, all of those lumped in should not exceed more than 25% of your take-home pay. And I want to be very, very clear. I couldn't disagree with this more. So make sure you stay tuned because we're going to talk about additional methods, because you're probably hearing this going, Jeb, at $65,000 a year, that's just $5,416 before taxes are actually taken out. So once taxes are taken out, which we'll say is about 20%, you're left with just $4,333 per month. And if he only wants you to use 25% of that, then essentially he's saying that he doesn't want you to spend more than $1,083 on your total monthly mortgage payment. And if you've ever run any back of the napkin calculations, you know that that's not going to equate to very much home. And the best part is I haven't even told you the worst part of his advice. He not only wants you to use just 25% of your net pay, he also wants you to do it on a 15-year fixed mortgage, which almost doubles the payment from a 30-year fixed mortgage. So if we were to use Dave Ramsey's basic calculation of 25% of your take-home pay, if you only make $65,000 a year, then essentially you're only buying about a $100,000 home in order to keep your payment under that $1,083, because at 7%, which is where interest rates are today, if we did a 15-year fixed mortgage on a $100,000 loan, that equates to $898 a month. Once we add property taxes on that, that's about $100 per month. We're already at $1,000. Once we add homeowners insurance on top of it, we're right at the budget that he wants us to max out at. But fortunately, from a lending standpoint, lenders use a little bit different ratios. If you go out and you search online, a lot of the recommendations out there and what lenders used to use in the past, not so much anymore, is this 28/36 rule. And I'm going to break down exactly what that means right after you hit the thumbs up if you're finding any value in this content at all. In fact, if you want to stay updated on everything real estate related, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. When discussing the 28/36 rule, that's essentially your debt to income ratio. That's how a lender determines how much home you can actually afford. And they start by taking your gross salary per year. That's before any taxes are taken out. Why did they use your gross salary? That's because some people have different things that come out of their monthly paychecks before actually getting them. Some people put money into a 401k. Some people put money into deferred comp. Some people have different exemptions. So in order to keep things equal and easy to calculate, the lender uses the gross monthly salary before any taxes are taken out. So if you make $65,000 a year, you just take that and you divide it by 12. That gives you $5,416 per month. And that's exactly what we're going to use in this video for your gross monthly salary. Now, in order to calculate your debt to income ratio, you need to understand what that actually means. It's your debt versus your income. So as I mentioned earlier, you have a front-end ratio and a back-end ratio when it comes to your debt-to-income ratio. Your front-end ratio are your proposed housing expenses, the house you're looking to purchase. It's the principal and interest, it's the taxes, the insurance, the HOA. All of the fees associated with that mortgage payment are your front-end ratio, which in the case that we're talking about now is a max of 28% of your gross monthly income. So if you take your gross monthly income of $5,416, you multiply it by 0.28 or 28%, that gives you a max front-end ratio of $1,516, which means in the case that we're using this 28/36 ratio, your mortgage payment can't exceed $1,516. But here's the thing, most people have monthly debt on top of their mortgage payment, things like car payments, credit cards, student loans, any sort of installment debt. All of that stuff that shows on your credit report has to be calculated into your debt to income ratio. So your front end ratio is just your housing expenses. Your back end ratio is your housing expenses plus those monthly debts that you have. So the easiest way to figure out how much monthly debt you can have and to still stick by this 28/36 ratio is take that gross monthly salary of $5,416 and multiply it by 0.36, which is essentially going to be the max back-end ratio that you can have. And in the case here, it's $1,949, which basically means that you can have a mortgage payment up to $1,516 and you can have around $433 in monthly debt that shows up on your credit report. Now, you might be saying, well, what if it doesn't show up on my credit report? Then it's not counted. We're not counting things like groceries or cell phone bills or date nights out with, your spouse or whoever it is. We're only counting the things that show up on your credit report. So as long as those debts are less than $433 a month, then you can meet that 28/36 ratio. But you're probably watching this going, well, Jeb, what does that actually mean? How much house can I buy if I'm trying to keep my ratios at this 28/36? Well, in the case that you're putting just 3.5% down, which is more or less the minimum out there when it comes to buying a house, and you're using an FHA loan, it's going to put you buying a house somewhere around $175,000 house, give or take a little bit. Now that's in order to keep your ratios at 28/36. Now one cool thing about FHA is they actually allow your ratios to go quite a bit higher than the recommendations out there. In fact, I don't recommend that you push the limit, but FHA allows you to push the limit if you're looking to push the limit. If you're looking to buy more house with less income, FHA is the easiest way to do that. Now, you might be going, well, Jeb, why would you want to do that? Well, sometimes people have income that's not reported. They have a side job, they started driving for Uber, or they do personal training or something on the side where they're making income and it's not reported in their monthly salary. So they're actually making more income than is on paper, so they might actually be able to afford it when on paper it doesn't look like it. So you need to know your situation. You need to know your finances. You shouldn't be allowing a lender out there to tell you how much home you can afford. And the reason I say this is because a lot of people go into the process expecting their lender to tell them how much they can afford. The lender's only there to tell you how much you can qualify for. It's up to you to know how much you can afford. But if you were looking to stick at that 28/36 ratio and you were using an FHA loan, you'd be limited somewhere around 175, whereas if you were using Dave Ramsey's method, you're limited at about 100,000. But here's the thing, we're going to push it and say how much you can afford actually using an FHA loan, because they allow your ratios to go up to 47% on the front end and as high as 57% on the back end, which means if we're using FHA, then you can push that mortgage payment all the way as high as $2,545 per month, in addition to having about $582 in monthly debt, because your back end ratio would need to stay under a total of $3,087 a month. So if your mortgage payment is $2,545 and you have $542 in monthly debt, you're essentially at that 47/57 ratio. Now again, this is not something I recommend. This would pucker my butt. If this was my true income and I didn't have any other income coming in and this was me pushing limits, I wouldn't recommend it. But the reality is you can do it assuming you meet all the other guidelines. So you're probably going, okay, well, how much home can I buy if I actually pushed those numbers? Well, if we use today's interest rates, you could actually buy a home somewhere around $300,000, because if you were using an FHA loan with just a 3.5% down payment, which in this case is a $10,500 down payment, because that's 3.5% of $300,000, and then you added back in the funding fee, which is required with FHA, that would mean you're financing $294,566. And at a 7% interest rate, which is where rates are today, your mortgage payment would be $1,960 per month. On top of that, you're going to have property taxes. Now, depending on where you're located in the country, property taxes are going to vary. The nationwide average is 1.1%, but there are places in Miami and New York and Texas where taxes are over 2%. So you need to do the right calculation based on where you're located in the country. But I use the nationwide average of 1.1%, which means property taxes would run roughly $275 a month. On top of that, you're going to have mortgage insurance because you're using an FHA loan. That mortgage insurance is 0.55% per month, which in the case of this loan amount is going to equate to $135 a month. On top of that, you're going to have homeowners insurance. I'm estimating it at roughly $150 per month. Now, depending on where you're located in the country, that number could vary as well, but that's going to give you a total monthly mortgage payment of $2,519, which falls under the 2,545 front-end ratio that we mentioned earlier. Now, something I like to point out in these videos is don't use this as the gospel. Don't go out and try to do all these calculations on your own. Use it as a rough draft to figure out if you're in a position to buy a home based on, what you're comfortable with per month. Take your salary, do the calculations that we said, and figure out where you are. But before you go out and try to buy a house, get under contract, make sure you're talking to a lender, discussing the options out there. You're having the conversation to see exactly where you stand, because the last thing you want to do is do your own calculations and end up wrong, get under contract to find out that you can't move forward. So before you move forward and try to buy a home, go through the pre-approval process. If you're not sure where to start, my team and I would love to help. You can reach us using the link in the description of this video. Now, for some of you watching this video, that's a relief that you can actually buy up to a $300,000 home using this salary, and other people out there, you're thinking, well, Jeb, we live in California. We can't find anything at $300,000. What are we supposed to do? Unfortunately, there's not a lot of options out there. When you're going through the pre-approval process, when they determine how much home you can actually afford to purchase, it's all based off your income and your debt. So if you want to be able to purchase more home, you essentially need more income and ultimately less debt. Now, if you don't have any debt at all, the best way to get qualified for more home is either to come in with more down payment or ultimately more income, or both. And another factor that plays into that is mortgage rates. As of today, mortgage rates are sitting around 7% at the time I'm filming this video. If mortgage rates were to drop back down to 6%, 5%, that's going to give you more buying power. It's essentially going to help affordability and allow you to purchase more home. That's why it's really, really important to discuss this with a lender when going through the process, not trying to do it on your own, because they can tell you exactly what you need to work on in order to set yourself up to buy a home when you're ready. Now, the other reason I say that is because there are some videos out there online that are showing you how to calculate your debt to income ratio that are wrong. They're not doing the right calculations as we mentioned earlier. They're taking the 28% and the 36% and counting them separately. They're one in the same. The 28% is part of the 36%. Now, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, go rewatch that in the video. But the 28% is your housing expenses. The 36% is your housing expenses plus your monthly debts. And the reason I bring this up is because there is some bad information out there on the internet, and it's not meant to be malicious. It's just misunderstood in some cases, and then it's passed on to the consumer, and then the consumer truly doesn't understand. So if you're somebody looking to buy a house, regardless of your salary, just make sure you're doing the right steps. You're going through the process, you're checking the I's, crossing the T's, and you're working with somebody that can ultimately get you to the finish line. But with that, there's a lot of opinions out there on how much you should spend on your mortgage payment. Mine is a little bit higher than most because I live in a high cost area, but there's a lot of people and a lot of opinions, but this is where I want to reach out to you. Where do you think the max someone should spend percentage wise based on their income is? Do me a favor and let me know in the comments below.